Most people wake up every morning doing what they're told, chasing goals they never chose, measuring success by standards they didn't create, and then they wonder why they feel empty. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Talent isn't what's holding you back. Resources aren't what's holding you back. Time isn't what's holding you back. What's holding you back is that you're moving fast, but in the wrong direction. We live in a world obsessed with what we do and how we do it. But the people who change industries, build movements, and inspire loyalty start somewhere very different. They start with clarity. They start with purpose. They start with the reason they exist, because when you know why you do what you do, decisions get simpler, fear gets quieter, and people don't just follow you, they believe in you. This isn't about motivation. This is about alignment. And once you see it, you'll never lead, work, or live the same way again. Clarity always comes before confidence, even though most men are taught to believe the opposite. Men are told to be bold, decisive, fearless. Yet no one explains that confidence without clarity is just noise. From a man's perspective, confidence feels like something you're supposed to summon, like a switch you flip when the pressure is on. From a woman's perspective, that same confidence often looks unstable when it isn't grounded in purpose. What both see, whether they realize it or not, is the difference between someone who knows where he's going and someone who is simply moving fast. Uncertainty is what quietly erodes a man's confidence long before anyone else notices. When a man doesn't know why he's doing what he's doing, every decision feels heavier, every failure feels personal, and every comparison feels threatening. Women sense this immediately, not through words, but through inconsistency. A lack of clarity shows up as defensiveness, overcompensation, or silence, and none of those create trust or respect. Clarity changes how a man carries himself even before he speaks. When a man understands his reason, his boundaries become firmer, his actions more consistent, and his presence calmer. From the outside, women interpret this not as dominance, but as safety. From the inside, men experience it not as bravado, but as relief. People don't commit to actions, words, or promises. They commit to intention. From a man's perspective, it often feels logical to explain results, achievements, and effort, believing that proof will earn respect. But psychology works differently. Men are driven to be valued for what they produce, while women are instinctively drawn to understanding why that effort exists. When the intention is unclear, even impressive results feel hollow, and trust never fully forms. Purpose is what turns behavior into belief. A man who knows why he does what he does moves with coherence instead of performance. His work, his leadership, and even his silence aligns with a deeper reason. Women don't respond to the volume of ambition. They respond to the consistency of meaning. When actions match intention over time, it signals emotional reliability, something far more persuasive than skill or status. Meaning creates loyalty in places logic never can. Men often try to convince through explanation, while women listen for alignment. When the why is present, decisions feel intentional rather than reactive, strength feels grounded rather than aggressive, and ambition feels shared rather than self-serving. What people ultimately connect to isn't the action itself, but the reason that gives the action its soul. Burnout doesn't come from working too hard. It comes from working without meaning. From a man's perspective, success is often defined by milestones, income, status, recognition, because those markers promise security and validation. Men push forward believing that once they arrive, fulfillment will follow. Women often see the cost before the man does, noticing the emotional distance, the exhaustion behind the ambition, and the quiet frustration that success fails to resolve. Achievement without purpose drains energy instead of renewing it. When a man doesn't understand why he's chasing a goal, every win feels temporary and every setback feels crushing. The drive turns into pressure, and pressure turns into fatigue. Women experience this as inconsistency, moments of intensity, followed by withdrawal. What looks like discipline on the surface often masks a lack of alignment underneath. Purpose acts as a stabilizer for ambition. A man who understands his deeper reason doesn't need to prove himself through constant motion. His effort becomes sustainable, his failures become informative, and his presence becomes more grounded. From the outside, women interpret this as emotional strength. From the inside, men feel less like they're surviving success and more like they're building something that actually sustains them. Leadership is not something you earn by a title or a corner office. It is something you carry every day through your choices and actions. For men, there's often a temptation to equate leadership with authority, power, or control, believing that status alone commands respect. Women, however, instinctively see leadership as a reflection of responsibility, consistency, and trustworthiness. Titles might impress, but responsibility inspires. True leadership is measured in the willingness to put others' needs alongside your own. Men feel pressure to appear competent and unshakable, but competence without care creates distance. Women sense this immediately. Confidence without empathy feels hollow, and ambition without accountability feels unsafe. Leadership isn't about being the loudest voice in the room. It's about setting a standard, guiding with intention, and creating an environment where people feel seen, heard, and valued. Responsibility is T. He bridged between authority and influence. When a man steps into this mindset, decisions shift from self-preservation to impact. His presence becomes steady, his commitments become reliable, and his influence grows naturally. Women respond not to directives, but to consistency and integrity, recognizing that the man who embraces responsibility inspires loyalty, trust, and connection without needing to demand it. Talent grabs attention, but consistency builds trust, and trust is the currency of lasting influence. Men are often conditioned to believe that skill or achievement alone earns respect, so they focus on proving themselves in bursts of brilliance. Women, however, read reliability in patterns rather than isolated victories. They notice whether actions match words over time, and that alignment becomes the foundation for belief, loyalty, and connection. Consistency requires patience and self-discipline, qualities that are invisible in the moment but felt deeply over time. Men may underestimate the quiet power of showing up day after day because the world celebrates dramatic wins. Women sense when a man's commitment is habitual rather than performative. A single act of competence can impress, but repeated acts of intentionality build confidence in his character. This is why consistency resonates on a psychological level. It signals stability, dependability, and emotional resilience, qualities that women naturally value in relationships and partnerships, and that men thems. Elves crave for internal grounding. When a man aligns his behaviors with his principles consistently, confidence is no longer fragile. It becomes self-reinforcing. Every decision, every interaction, every small action contributes to a narrative that people can rely on. Men feel the reassurance of certainty in their own identity, while women perceive a man who is predictable in his values, yet adaptable in his actions. Trust forms not because of what he can do, but because of the pattern he sustains over time. And that pattern speaks louder than raw talent ever could. Purpose is the fuel that transforms intention into action, and without it, even the most talented men can wander aimlessly. Men often believe that discipline or strategy alone will drive success, but when the underlying reason is unclear, energy dissipates and effort feels like a chore. Women perceive this immediately, not in words, but in the subtle cues of inconsistency, hesitation, or misalignment between what a man says and what he does. Clarity of purpose doesn't just guide behavior, it signals authenticity, and authenticity inspires connection. When a man discovers his why, decisions become simpler. He no longer questions every choice or second guesses every step because each action is tied to a principle bigger than himself. From the male perspective, this creates a profound sense of freedom. Work no longer feels like a grind, and challenges become opportunities to live in alignment with values. Women, on the other hand, respond to the clarity of intention with trust and admiration. They sense when a man's actions are motivated by something meaningful, and that sense of purpose fosters respect, emotional security, and loyalty. Action becomes inevitable because the why acts as a compass in the chaos of life. Men begin to notice patterns where there were only distractions before, and priorities fall naturally into place. Motivation becomes internal rather than external, and persistence transforms from an obligation into a natural consequence of alignment. Women interpret this consistency as reliability and strength, while men experience it as direction and confidence. When the why is clear, the friction that normally slows decision-making disappears. Momentum builds effortlessly, and effort becomes meaningful rather than forced. Every step moves forward, not because it must, but because it resonates with the core of who a man is.